The great crystal halls of Nexus Prime gleamed under artificial suns. Thousands of years had passed since the first meeting of the Galactic Council in these very chambers. The 5 ruling species had built their empire on order, control, and the simple truth that they were better than everyone else. Ambassador Zexthul stretched his long blue arms as he walked through the corridors. His people, the Zephyrians, could read minds and speak without words. This made them perfect rulers, he believed. They always knew what others were thinking before those others knew it themselves. The crystal walls around him pulsed with a soft light, responding to his thoughts of satisfaction and pride. In the main council chamber, beings from across the galaxy waited in perfect rows. Not all of them were there by choice. The Galactic Council had rules about attendance. Every species that wanted to trade, travel, or simply exist in peace had to send representatives to these meetings. They had to sit quietly and listen while the 5 great powers decided their fate. The chamber itself was a work of art. It could hold 10,000 beings, with viewing areas that floated in the air without any visible support. The ethereals had built it using technology that bent space itself. Everything about the place was designed to make visitors feel small and unimportant. High Counselor Vextar of the Kavari entered with heavy steps that echoed through the chamber. His species looked like giant wolves that walked on 2 legs, and they controlled the largest military force in the galaxy. Behind him came 3 other Kavari officers, each one scarred from battles fought to expand council territory. The insect-like beings of the collective moved in perfect unity to their seats. They shared one mind between millions of bodies, making decisions faster than any individual could think. Their queen mind spoke for all of them, and her word was absolute law for every member of their species. Floating above them came the ethereals, beings made of pure energy wrapped in shells of living crystal. They were the oldest species in the galaxy, older than most stars. They claimed to have guided lesser beings for millions of years, and their technology was beyond anything most species could understand. Finally, the synthesis took their places. They had given up their original bodies long ago, replacing flesh with machines. Now they existed as perfect combinations of organic minds and artificial bodies. They calculated everything, planned everything, and believed that emotion was a weakness that held other species back. These 5 species had divided the galaxy between them like pieces of cake. The Zephyrians controlled the core worlds where trade and communication flowed. The Kavari held the outer rim where military strength mattered most. The collective managed the industrial sectors where countless workers produced goods for the empire. The ethereals kept the most advanced worlds where science and technology developed. The synthesis ran the administrative centers where laws were made and enforced. Ambassador Zexthul rose to speak. His voice carried to every corner of the chamber without any need for amplification. This was another gift of his people. They could make themselves heard by anyone, anywhere, simply by thinking the right thoughts. Fellow counselors, he began, we gather today to celebrate another successful cycle of expansion and improvement. In the past standard year, we have brought 47 new species into our protective embrace. 12 primitive worlds have been elevated to productive status. Trade has increased by 8% across all sectors. Murmurs of approval came from the 5 ruling sections. In the observer areas, representatives from conquered species sat in silence. They had learned long ago that speaking without permission brought swift punishment. Vextar stood and growled his agreement. The military campaigns in the outer spiral went exactly as planned. 3 species that refused to accept council guidance have been educated about their place in the natural order. Their survivors are now grateful for our protection. The collective queen mind spoke in perfect unison through a dozen bodies. Production efficiency has improved in all integration facilities. New species adapt to their assigned roles within an average of 6 standard months. Resistance incidents have decreased by 15%. An ethereal's voice whispered through the minds of everyone present, causing many to shiver at the alien touch in their thoughts. The research stations continue to unlock the secrets of primitive technologies. We have cataloged and improved upon 17 different FTL drive designs this cycle. All improvements have been classified and distributed only to approved species. The synthesis representative's mechanical voice was perfectly emotionless. Administrative efficiency remains at 97%. Law enforcement actions have maintained order across all council territories. The probability of successful rebellion by any subject species remains below 1%. Zexthul nodded with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding according to plan, as it had for thousands of years. The galaxy was ordered, peaceful and productive under council rule. Lesser species were protected from their own violent and chaotic natures. Everyone had a place and a purpose. The integration of the Kythera proceeds smoothly, he continued, referring to a species that had been conquered 6 months ago. Their artistic talents are being channeled into productive cultural exports. Their world's resources are being efficiently extracted and distributed where they can do the most good. None of the council members mentioned that the Kythera had been reduced from a population of 8 billion to barely 2 million. None of them spoke about the mass graves or the re-education camps. These were simply the costs of bringing order to chaos, and the surviving Kythera should be grateful for the opportunity to contribute to something greater than themselves. The meeting continued for several hours. Reports were given about trade routes, military deployments, and scientific achievements. Each success story followed the same pattern: a species or world that had been discovered by council scouts, evaluated for potential, and then integrated into the greater galactic community. What this really meant was conquest, enslavement, and theft on a scale that dwarfed anything in galactic history. But the council members never used such crude words. They were civilized beings bringing order to a chaotic universe. In the observer sections, representatives from hundreds of species watched and listened. Some had been conquered recently and still remembered freedom. Others had been under council rule for generations and knew nothing else. All of them had learned to keep their thoughts carefully controlled when Zephyrians were present. The Vorthon ambassador shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His people had been integrated 50 years ago, and he still remembered the orbital bombardments that convinced them to surrender. Now the Vorthons worked in factories producing goods they would never be allowed to own, on worlds they would never be permitted to leave. Beside him sat the Nilari representative, whose people had been among the first to be conquered by the council. They had fought for decades before finally accepting their fate. Now they served as administrators and overseers for newer conquests, helping to break the spirits of species who still believed in freedom. The meeting was winding down when something unexpected happened. A junior synthesis officer hurried into the chamber and whispered urgently to the main synthesis representative. For the first time in years, the mechanical being showed something that might have been surprise. "Counselors," the synthesis announced, "long-range sensors have detected an unusual energy signature approaching the Nexus system. The configuration does not match any known drive technology in our databases." Zexthul frowned slightly. Unknown technology was rare but not unheard of. Sometimes a species developed something interesting before being discovered by council scouts. Origin and intent? Unknown. The vessel is not following established hyperspace corridors and has not requested permission to enter council space. Estimated arrival in 6 standard hours. Vextar's growl carried a note of annoyance. Some primitive species has obviously stolen FTL technology and doesn't know proper protocols. Have a patrol squadron intercept them and provide the usual education about galactic law. The ethereal's whispered voice carried amusement. How refreshing. It has been some time since we encountered a species bold enough to approach Nexus Prime without invitation. They will make an interesting study in primitive psychology. The collective queen mind buzzed with shared thought. Perhaps they have developed something worth adding to our technological archives. Theft and integration of useful innovations is always profitable. Zexthul nodded in agreement. Very well. Standard first contact protocols. Intercept, evaluate, and integrate if they prove useful. If not, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the chamber knew what happened to species that had nothing to offer the council. The meeting adjourned with the usual ceremonies and rituals. Council members filed out to their private transport pods, already dismissing the approaching unknown vessel from their thoughts. In thousands of years of galactic dominance, nothing had ever threatened their power. This would be just another minor encounter with primitives who needed to learn their place. In the observer sections, conquered species began their long journey back to transport bays and holding areas. They would return to their assigned worlds and continue their assigned roles, never speaking of what they had seen or heard. The Council's power was absolute, and resistance was impossible. But in the depths of space, something was approaching that would challenge everything the Council believed about their own superiority. The unknown vessel moved through hyperspace with a confidence that suggested its builders had never heard of the Galactic Council, or simply didn't care about Council authority. The galaxy's 10,000 years of ordered, controlled peace was about to end, and the 5 species that had ruled over countless others for so long were about to discover that there were still beings in the universe who refused to kneel. 6 hours later, the unknown vessel dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Nexus system. What happened next sent shockwaves through every Council monitoring station and defense platform in the sector. The ship didn't emerge from hyperspace like normal vessels. Instead of the usual gentle transition from faster-than-light travel to normal space, reality seemed to tear open like fabric. Energy readings spiked beyond anything in Council records. Gravitational waves rippled outward from the arrival point, causing space itself to bend and twist in ways that hurt to look at. Emergency alarms began wailing across Nexus Prime. In the Council's military command center, Kavari officers stared at sensor displays that showed readings they couldn't understand. The ship that had arrived was unlike anything in their databases. It was angular and predatory-looking, covered in weapon systems that didn't match any known technology. Size estimate? Barked General Thekfar, the Kavari military commander for the Nexus system. Approximately 1 kilometer in length, his aide reported, checking and rechecking the sensors. But the mass readings are impossible. It reads as both extremely heavy and almost weightless at the same time. Energy signature? Unknown type. Our computers can't classify it. It's like looking at a new color that doesn't exist. On the command bridge of the unknown vessel, Captain Sarah Chen studied the tactical displays showing Nexus Prime and its defenses. She was a compact woman with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much war. Her uniform was simple and practical, unlike the elaborate decorations favored by Council military leaders. "Analysis complete, Captain," reported her tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Torres. "Defensive platforms match intelligence reports. Standard energy shields, kinetic barrier projections, and conventional weapons. Nothing we can't handle," Captain Chen nodded grimly. She had been preparing for this moment for 3 years, ever since the massacre at New Geneva Colony. The Council thought they were dealing with another primitive species that had stumbled onto FTL technology. They were about to learn how wrong they were. "Open a communication channel to the planet," she ordered. "All frequencies, all languages in our database. Make sure everyone down there can understand what we're saying." The communications officer's fingers moved across holographic controls. "Channel open, Captain." Chen took a deep breath and began to speak. Her words were transmitted with enough power to reach every receiver in the system, cutting through whatever signals the Council was broadcasting. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force Warship Defiance. We are here to discuss the unprovoked attacks on our colonies in the Outer Rim sectors. You have 1 hour to provide acceptable explanations and reparations for the deaths of innocent civilians." In the Council chambers, emergency sessions were being called as fast as representatives could be gathered. The transmission had been received by every communication device on the planet, from the most advanced Council networks to simple personal communicators carried by servant species. Ambassador Zex Thul materialized in the emergency meeting room using Zephyrian teleportation technology. His usual calm demeanor was cracked by confusion and growing anger. "What is the meaning of this intrusion? Who are these humans, and why do they dare make demands of the Galactic Council?" High Counselor Vextar was already present, his massive form pacing back and forth like a caged predator. "Demands? No species has ever made demands of us. This is intolerable. We should destroy them immediately as an example to others." The collective Queen Mind spoke through 3 bodies simultaneously. "Information search complete. No record of species called humans or Terrans in any database. No record of colonies in referenced sectors. They appear to be completely unknown." An ethereal floated into the chamber, its crystalline form flickering with agitation. "The vessel's technology defies analysis. Our sensors cannot penetrate its hull or identify its power source. This should not be possible." The synthesis representative arrived last, its mechanical body showing signs of hasty construction. It had been assembled quickly from available components when the emergency began. Probability calculations indicate a 0.003% chance of this being a legitimate grievance. Most likely explanation is stolen technology being used by criminals or rebels. Vextar slammed his fist on the meeting table, cracking the crystalline surface. Then we crush them like any other criminal. No one threatens the council. Agreed, Zexthul said, his mental voice carrying to all present. Send the standard first contact response. They will submit to boarding and inspection, provide technological samples for evaluation, and prepare for integration assessment. If they refuse, they will be destroyed. The message was transmitted to the human vessel within minutes. The council's response was formal, cold, and absolutely certain of its own authority. Unknown vessel, you have entered restricted council space without permission. Submit to boarding and inspection immediately. Prepare to transfer technological specifications and submit to integration evaluation. Failure to comply will result in immediate destruction. On the bridge of the Defiance, Captain Chen read the council's response aloud to her crew. When she finished, the bridge was silent for several seconds. Then Lieutenant Commander Torres began to laugh, a cold, bitter sound that had no humor in it. They want us to submit to boarding? Torres said. They want us to hand over our technology for evaluation? After what they did to New Geneva? Chen's expression remained calm, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the command chair. Compose a response, Lieutenant. Single-word transmission. The communications officer looked puzzled. What word, Captain? Chen's smile was like winter ice. No. The transmission went out on all frequencies, just as simple and clear as possible. One word in the human language, but somehow it carried enough contempt and defiance to be understood by any species, regardless of translation protocols. In the council chambers, the response created stunned silence. In 10,000 years of galactic dominance, no species had ever simply refused council authority. The word itself might be unknown, but its meaning was crystal clear. Impossible, whispered the ethereal. They must not understand the situation. No rational being would refuse council authority. Zexthul's mental voice crackled with rage. They understand perfectly. They simply choose to defy us. This cannot be allowed to stand. Vextar was already reaching for his communication device. I'll mobilize the defense fleet immediately. We'll show them what happens to those who refuse council law. Wait, the synthesis representative said, its voice unnaturally calm. Analysis suggests we should determine their capabilities before engaging. The energy signature of their arrival was unprecedented. Their capabilities? Vextar roared. They have one ship, one, against the might of the entire council fleet. But even as he spoke, something nagged at the Kavari commander's mind. In his centuries of military service, he had learned to trust his instincts. And his instincts were telling him that something about this situation was very, very wrong. The human ship hung in space at the edge of the system, making no aggressive moves but also showing no signs of backing down. Its weapons remained powered but not targeted. Its shields, if it had shields, were not visible to council sensors. It simply waited like a predator that knew its prey would come to it. Deploy Squadron Omega, Vextar finally ordered. 12 heavy cruisers and 4 dreadnoughts. That should be more than enough to deal with one primitive vessel. If they still refuse to surrender, destroy them. The orders went out across the Nexus defense network. Massive council warships began moving from their patrol positions and dock facilities. Each one was a masterpiece of military engineering, armed with weapons that could crack planets and protected by shields that had never been penetrated. Captain Chen watched the approaching fleet on her tactical displays. 15 major warships plus escorts, more firepower than most species could deploy in their entire military. The Council was taking this seriously, but they still didn't understand what they were facing. Battle stations, she ordered calmly. All hands prepare for combat. Remember, we're not just fighting for ourselves. Every species the Council has enslaved is watching this moment. The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency. These were veterans who had been fighting impossible odds for years. They had learned to turn Council technology against itself, to find weaknesses in systems designed to be invincible, to win battles that should have been massacres. Captain, the tactical officer reported, lead Council vessel is transmitting surrender demands. Chen looked at the massive dreadnought approaching her position. It was beautiful in its own way, a work of art designed to inspire fear and submission. In a few minutes it would be scrap metal floating in space. Signal to all Council vessels, she said quietly. Tell them they have one chance to withdraw. After that, we consider any approach an act of war. The message went out, but no one really expected the Council fleet to retreat. They had never backed down from anyone, and they wouldn't start now. The galaxy's first lesson in human stubbornness was about to begin. Squadron Commander Zach Thresh had been a Kavari military officer for over 2 centuries. He had led fleets against dozens of species across the galaxy. He had bombarded worlds, destroyed space stations, and crushed rebellions before they could truly begin. In all that time, he had never lost a battle. His flagship, the Dreadnought Dominance, was one of the most powerful warships ever built. 3 kilometers long and armed with enough weapons to sterilize a planet, it had been the sword of Council Justice for 50 years. Behind it came 11 other massive warships, each one capable of destroying entire enemy fleets. Range to target, Zach Thresh growled to his tactical officer. 200,000 kilometers and closing, Commander. The alien vessel maintains position and has not powered weapons. Shields? No energy signatures detected that match known shield technology. Either they have no defensive systems or they're using something we can't identify. Zach Thresh studied the human ship on his main display. It looked dangerous, but it was still just 1 vessel against 15. The outcome was certain. Still, something about the situation bothered him. In his experience, species that advanced far enough to develop FTL technology were rarely stupid enough to fight impossible battles. "Open communication channel," he ordered. "I'll give them one final chance to surrender." The channel opened and Zach Thresh put all of his authority into his voice. "Unknown vessel. This is Squadron Commander Zach Thresh of the Galactic Council Defense Force. You are completely outgunned and outnumbered. Surrender immediately and your crew will be treated according to Council law." Captain Chen's response came back immediately, her voice calm and professional. "Commander Zach Thresh, this is Captain Chen. I'm going to give you some free advice. Turn your ships around and leave this system. You're about to make a mistake that will cost thousands of lives." Zach Thresh's officers looked at each other in disbelief. The alien captain was actually trying to warn them off. The arrogance was incredible. "You mistake our mercy for weakness," Zach Thresh snarled. "This is your final warning. Surrender now or be destroyed." "Then I guess we're doing this the hard way," Chen replied. "Try not to take it personally." The communication channel went dead. For a moment, both fleets hung motionless in space. Then Zach Thresh gave the order that would change galactic history forever. "All ships open fire. Destroy the target. 15 massive Council warships unleash their full firepower at once. Energy beams that could melt asteroids, plasma bolts hot enough to ignite atmospheres, and kinetic projectiles moving at significant fractions of light speed all converged on the human vessel. The space around the Defiance lit up like a small star as the Council weapons struck. Energy readings spiked off the scale. Any normal ship would have been vaporized instantly, leaving nothing but expanding gas and debris. When the light faded and sensors cleared, the human ship was gone. "Target destroyed," reported the tactical officer with satisfaction. "No debris detected, complete vaporization achieved." But Zach Thresh was still staring at his displays with growing alarm. The energy readings weren't right. There should have been residual traces, scattered particles, something to indicate that a physical object had been destroyed. Instead, there was nothing at all. "Sir," his sensor officer said in a confused voice, "I'm reading gravitational distortions throughout the formation. Something is affecting local spacetime." "What kind of distortions?" Before anyone could answer, the human ship materialized directly behind the Dominance less than 1,000 kilometers away. It hadn't been destroyed. It had simply vanished from normal spacetime and reappeared somewhere else entirely. Alarms screamed across the Council formation as tactical officers tried to track a target that shouldn't exist. The Defiance wasn't just moving through space. It was moving through dimensions that Council science insisted were impossible to access. "How are they doing that?" Zach Thresh roared. "Ships can't just disappear and reappear." His science officer was frantically running calculations on her instruments. "Commander, they appear to be shifting in and out of normal spacetime. It's like they're using dimensions we can't even detect." The human ship began to move through the Council formation like a ghost. It would appear long enough to fire its weapons, then vanish before return fire could reach it, and its weapons were unlike anything the Council had ever faced. Instead of energy beams or plasma bolts, the Defiance fired what looked like tears in space itself. These reality-distorting projectiles punched through Council shields as if they didn't exist, then did impossible things to the ships they hit. The heavy cruiser Righteous Justice simply folded in half as one of the human weapons hit it amidships. The hull didn't break or melt. It folded like paper, crushing the crew compartments inside. The ship's reactor went critical seconds later, adding a brief new star to the battle. Another cruiser, the Stellar Sword, found its forward section twisted into a spiral shape that shouldn't have been able to exist in normal physics. The ship's crew had seconds to stare at their impossibly warped bridge before the distorted matter finally gave up and exploded. "Target the human ship," Zach Thresh screamed into his communicator. "All vessels concentrate fire." But the Defiance was never where Council weapons were aimed. It danced between dimensions, appearing and disappearing like a nightmare-given form. Every time Council ships tried to target it, they ended up firing at empty space or worse, at each other. The dreadnought Eternal Vigilance tried to ram the human ship as it materialized nearby. For a brief moment, it seemed like the tactic might work. The massive Council warship was 10 times larger than the Defiance and moving at considerable speed. Instead of dodging, Captain Chen did something that made every Council sensor officer question their sanity. The human ship simply phased partially out of normal space, allowing the Kavari dreadnought to pass through it like a solid object moving through fog. As the Eternal Vigilance continued its futile charge, parts of its hull began to distort where they had intersected with the human ship. Metal twisted into impossible shapes, corridors became Mobius strips, and crew compartments turned inside out. The great warship shuddered to a halt, its structure too compromised to continue fighting. "This is impossible." Zach Thresh's tactical officer was openly panicking now. "Ships can't phase through each other. Physics doesn't work that way." "Tell that to them," Zach Thresh growled, watching another of his vessels come apart under the human ship's impossible weapons. The battle had been raging for less than 4 minutes, and already half the Council formation was destroyed or disabled. The surviving ships were firing wildly in all directions, trying to hit a target that treated the laws of physics as polite suggestions. Captain Chen's voice came over the communication channel again, still perfectly calm despite the chaos around her. "Commander Zach Thresh, you've lost 8 ships and are about to lose more. Order your remaining vessels to withdraw, and I'll let them go." "Never," Zach Thresh roared back. "The Council does not retreat from primitives." "Your choice," Chen replied sadly. The Defiance materialized directly above the Dominance, so close that the 2 ships were almost touching. At this range, even Council shields wouldn't matter. The human ship's main weapon powered up, reality bending around its barrel as it prepared to fire. Zach Thresh stared up at the impossible vessel through his bridge viewport. He could see strange lights moving along its hull, patterns that hurt to look at directly. This wasn't just advanced technology. This was something that operated by rules no Council scientist had ever imagined. "All power to forward shields," he screamed. "Brace for impact!" But the human ship didn't fire its main weapon. Instead, something far more terrifying happened. The Dominance's own reactor core simply disappeared from its housing, reappearing in open space several thousand kilometers away. Without its power source, the great dreadnought went dark. Emergency lighting flickered on as backup systems engaged, but the ship was effectively dead in space. Its weapons powered down, its shields collapsed, and its engines fell silent. "How?" Zach Thresh whispered, staring at his darkened displays. "How did they do that?" Chen's voice came over the emergency channel. "Your reactor is over there," she said, and Zach Thresh could hear something like sympathy in her tone. "I could have let it go critical inside your ship. But your crew doesn't deserve to die for their leader's stupidity." The remaining Council ships were already beginning to withdraw, their commanders finally realizing that they were fighting something beyond their ability to defeat. The human ship made no attempt to pursue them, content to let them retreat with news of what they had witnessed. In 4 minutes and 37 seconds, a single human vessel had destroyed or disabled the most powerful naval formation the Council could field in the Nexus system. It had done so using technology that seemed to operate outside the known laws of physics, and with tactics that no military academy in the galaxy would have considered possible. Worse, from the Council's perspective, the human captain had shown mercy. She could have killed thousands of crew members, but instead she had surgically disabled their ships and offered them chances to retreat. This suggested not just superior technology, but superior discipline and purpose. As the surviving Council ships limped back toward Nexus Prime, their crews babbling about impossible maneuvers and weapons that violated causality itself, Captain Chen set course for the planet. The Defiance moved at a leisurely pace, broadcasting what could only be described as extremely rude music on all frequencies. The music was an ancient human song called Welcome to the Jungle, and while the Council's translation computers couldn't make sense of all the lyrics, the aggressive mocking tone was clear in any language. On Nexus Prime, emergency sessions were being called as panicked reports flooded in from the battle site. The unthinkable had happened. The Council's military supremacy had been shattered by a single enemy vessel. Everything they believed about their own invincibility was crumbling along with the wreckage of their once mighty fleet. And the human ship was still coming, still broadcasting its insulting music, still treating the combined might of the Galactic government like a minor inconvenience to be swept aside. The age of Council dominance was ending, and it had taken less than 5 minutes. The emergency meeting in the Council chambers was unlike anything in Galactic history. Representatives from the 5 ruling species sat in stunned silence as reports came in from the battle site. Fleet Admiral Kexthul of the Kavari military was barely coherent as he tried to explain what had happened. The ship just vanished, he kept repeating. Our sensors couldn't track it. Our weapons couldn't hit it. It moved through space like it wasn't really there. Ambassador Zexthul's mental voice was sharp with disbelief and growing fear. One ship cannot defeat an entire squadron. You must have made tactical errors. No errors, Admiral Kexthul snarled back. I've been fighting battles since before your species learned to fly. This wasn't tactics. This was something that shouldn't be possible. The synthesis representative was processing data from dozens of sources at once, its mechanical mind trying to make sense of readings that defied analysis. Sensor data confirms the Admiral's report. The human vessel appears to operate outside established physics parameters. Current technology databases cannot explain observed capabilities. High Counselor Vextar paced back and forth like a caged animal. Then we bring more ships. More weapons! Mass the entire Council fleet if necessary. With what? Admiral Kexthul shot back. If they can do this to Squadron Omega, what makes you think more ships will help? They destroyed our most powerful weapons by making them useless. An ethereal floated into the chamber, its crystalline form flickering with agitation. The situation is worse than reported. The human vessel is now in orbit around Nexus Prime. It is not attacked, but it is broadcasting on all frequencies. What kind of broadcast? Zexthul demanded. Data packets. Massive amounts of information being transmitted simultaneously in thousands of languages. Our communication networks are being overwhelmed. Vexitar's growl was low and dangerous. What information? The ethereal's voice became even more whispered than usual. Records. Historical data. Evidence of activities. That should not be public knowledge. A cold silence fell over the chamber. For 10,000 years, the Council had carefully controlled information flow throughout the galaxy. The conquered species knew only what their rulers wanted them to know. Uncomfortable truths about the Council's methods were classified at the highest levels. Show us, Zexthul said quietly. The chamber's main display activated, showing a transmission from the human ship. Captain Chen appeared on screen, her expression serious but calm. Behind her, the bridge of her ship hummed with activity as her crew worked at stations that looked nothing like Council technology. People of the galaxy, Chen began. My name is Captain Sarah Chen of the Terran Defense Force. I'm broadcasting this message to every inhabited world, every space station and every ship that can receive it. What I'm about to tell you may shock you, but you have a right to know the truth about your government. The transmission switched to display documents, video recordings, and data files. The first showed a beautiful blue-green world with cities that gleamed like jewels under a golden sun. The caption identified it as the homeworld of the Alteran civilization. This is Altara Prime as it looked 50 years ago. Chen's voice continued as narrator. Population 4 billion. A peaceful species known throughout their region for art, music, and scientific achievement. They had achieved interstellar flight and were exploring nearby systems when Council scouts found them. The image changed to show the same world, but now it was a barren wasteland of strip mines and industrial complexes. The beautiful cities were gone, replaced by utilitarian structures that looked more like prison camps than homes. This is Altara Prime today. Population, 400,000, all assigned to mining and manufacturing roles. The Alteran culture has been declared inefficient and replaced with productive activities. Their art is banned. Their music is forbidden. Their children are raised in Council facilities and taught only what their masters want them to know. In the council chambers, Vextar started to speak, but Zexthul silenced him with a sharp mental command. They needed to see how much the humans knew. The broadcast continued with more examples. Worlds that had been stripped of resources and left as lifeless husks. Species that had been reduced from billions to thousands and forced into slavery. Entire civilizations that had been wiped out because they refused to surrender their freedom. The council calls this integration and guidance, Chen said, her voice carrying barely controlled anger. They claim to be protecting primitive species from their own violent nature. The truth is that the council has committed genocide on a scale that beggars imagination. Video recordings began playing. Actual footage from council military operations. Orbital bombardments of civilian cities, mass executions of political leaders. Concentration camps where entire populations were worked to death in industrial facilities. Most damaging of all were the recordings of council meetings, where these atrocities were planned and celebrated. High-ranking officials discussing the disposal of excess population and the optimization of species for various work roles. Throughout the galaxy, billions of beings watched in stunned silence as the truth about their government was finally revealed. On conquered worlds, resistance fighters wept as they saw confirmation of what they had always suspected. In council territory, administrative personnel stared at evidence of crimes they had helped to commit. But that's not the worst of it, Chen continued. The council hasn't just been committing genocide. They've been lying about it to themselves. They actually believe their own propaganda about bringing order to chaos and protecting primitive species. The transmission shifted to show psychological profiles of council leaders, medical scans of their brains, and analysis of their behavior patterns. The humans had been studying their enemies for years, learning their weaknesses and blind spots. The Kavari truly believe they are protecting weaker species by conquering them, Chen explained. The Zephyrians think their mental abilities make them natural rulers. The collective can't understand why other species don't want to give up individual thought. The ethereal see themselves as wise guides helping younger races mature. The synthesis believe that emotion and creativity are flaws to be corrected. In the council chambers, the 5 representatives listened to their deepest beliefs being dissected with surgical precision. It was accurate enough to be terrifying. The humans understood them better than they understood themselves. This isn't evil for the sake of evil, Chen said. This is what happens when power goes unchecked for too long. When no one can say no to you, you forget that you can be wrong. When everyone fears you, you mistake fear for respect. When you control all information, you start believing your own lies. The broadcast changed again, this time showing star charts and tactical displays. Red markers indicated council territory, while blue markers showed something else entirely. The council thinks they rule the galaxy, Chen said with a cold smile. They control maybe 30% of inhabited space. The rest of us have been watching you, studying you, and preparing for this day. The display zoomed in on specific systems, showing space stations, shipyards, and defensive installations that the council had never detected. Hundreds of species that were supposedly extinct or primitive were revealed to be alive, free, and technologically advanced. Every time the council destroyed a civilization, some survivors escaped, Chen explained. Every time they enslaved a species, resistance fighters fled to the outer sectors. For thousands of years, you've been creating your own enemies and never realizing it. Admiral Kexthul was staring at the display in horror. Those are military bases, he whispered. Hundreds of them. How did we not know? The synthesis representative was processing the data at machine speed. Analysis indicates systematic intelligence failure across all monitoring networks. Either our sensors are completely inadequate, or these installations use sophisticated stealth technology. Or, Zexthul said quietly, they're so far beyond our technology that we literally can't see them unless they want to be seen. The broadcast continued with more revelations. Trade networks that bypassed council space entirely, scientific research that had advanced far beyond anything in council databases, cultural exchanges between species that were supposed to be extinct or enslaved. While you were building an empire based on fear and control, Chen said, the rest of us were building a community based on cooperation and mutual respect. While you were fighting to keep everyone else down, we were helping each other reach for the stars. Images flashed across the screen. Vast space cities where dozens of species lived and worked together in harmony. research stations where the greatest minds in the galaxy collaborated on projects that dwarfed anything the Council had achieved, fleets of ships that made Council dreadnoughts look like primitive toys. The reason we're here, Chen said, her voice becoming harder, is because you attacked our colonies in the Outer Rim. New Geneva, New Tokyo, New Cairo. Peaceful settlements where humans and other species were building new lives together. You murdered 40,000 innocent people because you couldn't tolerate the idea that someone might be happy without your permission. The transmission showed footage from the attacked colonies, orbital bombardment reducing cities to rubble, Council troops executing civilians, children crying over the bodies of their parents. It was brutal, ugly, and undeniably real. So we decided it was time for a conversation, Chen said. Time to explain some things about how the galaxy really works, and time to make some changes to the current management structure. In the Council chambers, panic was beginning to set in. If even half of what the humans were broadcasting was true, then everything the Council believed about their own power was an illusion. They weren't the supreme rulers of the galaxy. They were just local bullies who had never encountered real opposition. They're lying, Vextar said, but his voice lacked conviction. This is propaganda designed to undermine our authority. Is it? The ethereal whispered. Can you prove any of it is false? Can you explain how they defeated our finest fleet with a single ship? Can you account for the technology they're displaying? The collective queen mind buzzed with shared distress. Database analysis indicates high probability of truth in human claims. Cross-referencing with historical records shows correlation between reported integration dates and actual genocide campaigns. Then what do we do? Admiral Kexthul asked, his military mind already calculating the impossible odds they faced. Before anyone could answer, a new voice spoke in the chamber. It wasn't transmitted through any communication device. It simply appeared in everyone's mind at once, carrying the weight of absolute authority. You will listen, Captain Chen said, her mental voice somehow reaching them across the vacuum of space. And then you will choose. The mental voice of Captain Chen echoed through the Council chambers with a power that made even the Zephyrians feel helpless. She was speaking directly into their minds without using any technology they could detect or block. For telepathic species like the Zephyrians, this was like having someone walk through walls that shouldn't exist. How? Ambassador Zexthul whispered, his own mental barriers crumbling under the alien presence in his thoughts. How are you doing this? Shen's response carried a note of dark amusement. You think telepathy is unique to your species? You think you're the only ones who learn to touch minds across space? We've been studying you for decades, learning your tricks and improving on them. The truth was even more terrifying than the Council members realized. Humanity hadn't just developed technology to match their enemies. They had developed technology to exceed it. Where the Zephyrians could read surface thoughts, humans could speak directly to the unconscious mind. Where the ethereals could manipulate energy, humans could manipulate space and time itself. The demonstration is over, Chen continued, her mental voice reaching every being on Nexus Prime simultaneously. Now we talk about the future. You have 3 choices, and I suggest you consider them very carefully. Captain Chen appeared on every display screen across the planet, but this time she wasn't alone. Behind her stood representatives from dozens of species, beings that the Council had thought extinct or primitive. All of them were armed with weapons that looked far more advanced than anything in Council arsenals. Choice 1, Chen said aloud, her voice carrying to every corner of Nexus Prime. You can fight us. You can mobilize every ship in your fleet, call in every favor, and throw everything you have at the problem. This will result in the complete destruction of your military forces and the liberation of every world under Council rule. Your species will survive, but your empire will not. Holographic displays showed the true scope of what humanity and its allies had built in the outer sectors. Thousands of warships that made Council dreadnoughts look like shuttlecraft. Space stations the size of moons bristling with weapons that operated on principles Council science couldn't begin to understand. Defensive networks that spanned entire star systems. Choice 2, Chen continued. You can try to negotiate some kind of compromise. Perhaps you offer to reform your government, promise to treat conquered species better, or propose some kind of shared authority arrangement. This will also result in the complete destruction of your military forces and the liberation of every world under Council rule. We're not interested in reforms or compromises with genocidal regimes. Images flashed across the screen showing previous attempts at negotiation with tyrannical governments throughout human history. In every case, the results had been temporary at best, with oppression resuming as soon as the immediate threat passed. Choice 3, Chen said, and for the first time her expression softened slightly. You can surrender, completely and unconditionally. You will release all conquered territories, disband your military forces, and submit to trials for crimes against sentient life. Your species will be allowed to govern yourselves within your original borders, but you will never again have authority over others. High Counselor Vextar's roar of rage echoed through the chamber. Never. The Kavari do not surrender to anyone. We would rather die fighting than accept such terms. That's choice 1, Chen replied calmly. And it can be arranged. Through the windows of the council chambers, they could see the human ship hanging in orbit like a dark omen. It wasn't alone anymore. As they watched, more vessels began appearing throughout the system. Not dozens, but hundreds. Ships of every size and design representing dozens of species that were supposed to be extinct or enslaved. The New Geneva colony that you destroyed, Chen said, was home to 40,000 beings from 18 different species. They were farmers, artists, teachers, and engineers. They were building something beautiful together, a place where beings could live in peace regardless of their biology or culture. The display changed to show images of the colony before the attack. It had indeed been beautiful, a mix of architectural styles from many different worlds, with parks and gardens where different species children played together, schools where young beings learned about other cultures, and workshops where the greatest minds from across the galaxy collaborated on peaceful projects. Your forces arrived without warning and without provocation, Chen continued, her voice growing harder. They gave no opportunity for surrender or negotiation. They simply began killing everyone they could find. Men, women, children, elderly beings who posed no threat to anyone, all murdered for the crime of being happy without council permission. The footage of the attack was brutal to watch. Council ships in orbit, raining death on civilian targets. Kavari troops executing unarmed colonists. Entire families burned alive in their homes. It went on for hours, systematic and thorough. Among the dead was Dr. Elena Vasquez, Chen said, and her voice cracked slightly with emotion. She was my daughter, a xenobiologist who spent her life studying ways to help different species coexist. She was 43 years old, had 2 children of her own, and died trying to shield an injured Alteran child from your soldiers. In the council chambers, even the most hardened representatives felt a chill. This wasn't just about politics or territory. This was personal. They were dealing with a parent who had watched her child die, and that parent commanded technology that could reshape reality. So you see, Chen continued, this isn't really about galactic politics or military strategy. This is about justice. You murdered my daughter and 40,000 others because you thought no one could stop you. You were wrong. The displays showed more images from the battle earlier that day. Council ships being torn apart by weapons that shouldn't exist. Reality itself bending to accommodate human technology. The proud dominance reduced to a powerless hulk drifting in space. We don't want to rule the galaxy, Chen said. We don't want to build an empire or impose our values on others. We want something much simpler. We want bullies to stop hurting people. We want beings to be free to choose their own governments and live their own lives. We want children to grow up without fear. Around the system, more human ships continued to arrive. Not just warships, but hospital vessels, engineering platforms, and transport craft. This wasn't an invasion force. It was a rescue operation on a galactic scale.
The choice is yours, Chen said. But choose quickly. Every minute you delay, more beings suffer under your rule. Every hour you waste, more children die in your camps. Every day that passes, more species lose hope that freedom is possible. Admiral Kexthul was studying tactical displays with growing despair. The human fleet now numbered in the thousands, and more ships were arriving by the hour. Even if the Council could mobilize every warship in their territories, they would still be outnumbered 10-1 by enemies using impossible technology. "We can't fight them," he said quietly. "They have too many ships and their weapons are too advanced. Any battle would be a massacre." Sexathul's mental voice was tight with fear and rage. "Then what do you suggest? That we simply surrender everything our peoples have built? What we built was stolen." The ethereal whispered, its form flickering with distress. "Every world, every resource, every life, all taken by force from beings who couldn't defend themselves. Perhaps it is time to return what was never ours to take." The collective queen mind buzzed with confused thoughts from millions of drones. "Analysis indicates all viable options result in loss of current territorial holdings. Probability of successful resistance approaches 0. Recommendation: minimize casualties through negotiated surrender." The synthesis representative was quiet for several minutes, processing vast amounts of data. Finally, it spoke in its emotionless, mechanical voice. "Historical analysis of similar situations indicates that continued resistance results in exponentially higher casualty rates. Optimal strategy for species survival requires acceptance of human terms." Vextar looked around the chamber at his fellow council members, seeing defeat reflected reflected in every face. The great empire that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years was crumbling, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. "You're all cowards," he snarled. "The Kavari will never surrender. We'll fight to the last ship, the last soldier, the last breath." Chen's voice reached them again, still patient but with an edge of steel. "High Counselor Vextar, your courage is admirable but misplaced. If you choose to fight, you'll only get your own people killed for no purpose. Your fleet can't hurt us, and your weapons can't breach our defenses. All you'll accomplish is turning your species into martyrs for a cause that was always wrong. Better to die free than live as slaves." "You were never free," Chen replied sadly. "You were just the ones holding the chains. Real freedom means having the choice to be wrong without having someone else force their will on you. It means accepting that other beings have the right to live their own lives, even if you don't understand or approve of their choices. The human fleet had now completely surrounded Nexus Prime. Thousands of ships from dozens of species, all united in common cause. On the planet's surface, emergency broadcasts were going out as liberated species began reaching out to their scattered people, telling them that freedom was finally at hand. "I'm going to give you 1 hour to decide," Chen said. "After that, we begin liberating your territories with or without your cooperation. It will be easier for everyone if you surrender voluntarily, but we're prepared to do this the hard way if necessary." The council chambers fell silent as the transmission ended. For the first time in galactic history, the 5 ruling species faced a choice between